What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, Emma Watson, stands her ground on live television against a relentless, probing host? Tonight, Stage View brings you a story that unfolds like a thriller, a confrontation that left audiences gasping, social media exploding, and even seasoned journalists whispering backstage. But before we dive in, smash that subscribe button for Stage View and hit like, because you won't want to miss a second of this electrifying saga. Comment your initial reactions below. Let's talk about this shocking moment together. The studio lights glared down like a harsh sun, highlighting the immaculate set of The View. Cameras rolled, capturing every angle, every microexpression. The audience buzzed with anticipation, sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. On one side, a woman known for her sharp wit and unwavering confidence, Sunny Hostin, sat poised, her fingers lightly tapping the papers in front of her. Across from her, Emma Watson, elegant, composed, but unmistakably tense, radiated a calm that masked a storm beneath. The segment began innocuously enough, with pleasantries exchanged and the usual commentary on Hollywood and activism. But then, Hostin's tone shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Emma, you've spoken publicly about using your platform to challenge societal norms. But some critics argue that your recent statements on gender and identity are controversial. How do you respond to accusations that you're overstepping?" A collective hush fell over the studio. The audience sensed the needle of tension being carefully threaded. Emma's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in that precise, deliberate focus of someone about to speak truth. "I appreciate the question," she began, voice steady yet layered with unmistakable resolve. "But I think it's important to consider context. Advocacy isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about speaking from a place of informed conviction." Hostin leaned in, sensing a potential opening. "But don't you think that by speaking out, you risk alienating your fans, or even sparking backlash?" The pause that followed was electric. The audience leaned forward, cameras zoomed in, and even the offset crew seemed frozen mid-breath. Emma's hands rested lightly in her lap, but inside, the tension was a taut wire. "I don't believe meaningful change comes from fear of backlash," she said carefully, but the underlying fire was audible in her tone. "I believe it comes from courage, and from holding uncomfortable conversations, even when they challenge us." Hostin's smile was polite but sharpened at the edges. "Uncomfortable conversations can be messy, though. Some might argue that your recent campaigns—" Emma's gaze locked onto Hostin's. There was a flicker, just a fraction of a second, of steel beneath her composed exterior. "Some might argue," she interrupted, voice rising slightly, controlled but firm. "But I don't craft my actions around the comfort of critics. If my work inspires dialogue, reflection, or change, then it has served its purpose." The studio audience responded with murmurs, a mix of applause and astonishment. The tension was now undeniable, a living thing filling the space between them. Hostin's next words were delivered with the practiced cadence of a seasoned interviewer, but they carried a sharper edge. "But Emma, surely you must see the fine line between advocacy and imposing your views on others. Isn't there a danger in speaking so assertively on complex issues?" Emma leaned forward slightly, her calm morphing into palpable intensity. "I speak from knowledge, research, and lived experience," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "If people interpret that as imposition, then I encourage them to engage, question, and discuss. Silence out of fear is not progress. I'm not here to appease. I'm here to illuminate." The audience reacted immediately, some clapping, some whispering to neighbors, all captivated. Behind the scenes, the producers exchanged tense glances. No one had expected this level of forthrightness. Sunny Hostin, accustomed to controlling the narrative, now faced a formidable opponent, someone who refused to yield. The cameras captured every flicker of expression. Emma's subtle nods, the sharp intake of breath from Hostin, the audience caught in the gravitational pull of a moment that felt unscripted, raw, and entirely unsparing. For viewers at home, it was as if the tension leapt through the screen, challenging them to pick a side, or at least to reconsider their assumptions about celebrity discourse. Emma's inner thoughts swirled behind her serene exterior. She knew the stakes. Every word, every inflection would be dissected online, dissected in articles, memes, and heated Twitter threads. But she held firm. She had rehearsed her intent, not the delivery, and that distinction made her answers feel organic, grounded, yet unshakably potent. The conversation veered into a territory rarely navigated so publicly: the collision of fame, responsibility, and personal conviction. Hostin, recognizing the intensity of Emma's resolve, shifted tactics subtly, probing with hypotheticals, testing boundaries. "Imagine a young fan who admires you," she said, voice lowering slightly, "but who feels conflicted or even confused by your activism. How do you guide them without dictating what they should think?" Emma's response was measured but piercing. "I don't dictate. I illuminate possibilities. I offer perspectives. My goal is not to create agreement, but to inspire thought. Confusion is not a weakness. It's a signal that growth is possible." And in that moment, the atmosphere in the studio transformed. What had started as a standard daytime interview now resembled a carefully choreographed duel. Intellect against intellect, conviction against scrutiny, calm against probing tension. Audience members exchanged glances, whispers rising like waves across the room. Some were in awe, others visibly uncomfortable, caught in the raw honesty that spilled over from the stage into their own consciousness. The cameras cut back to Emma Watson and Sunny Hostin, but the atmosphere had shifted. What had been professional curiosity now carried an almost electric charge, as if the very air in the studio vibrated with anticipation. Emma's calm composure was no longer just grace, it was armor. Hostin, sensing the stakes, sharpened her questions, each word carefully measured to probe, to unsettle, to reveal cracks that weren't there. "Emma," Hostin said, leaning forward, her elbows resting on the desk, "some critics have labeled your advocacy as performative, that it's more about image than impact. How do you respond to that?" Emma's eyes didn't flinch. A faint line of resolve appeared between her brows. The pause that followed was deliberate, heavy with weight. Then, with a voice that carried both fire and clarity, she spoke. "I cannot control what others label me. But every campaign I've taken on, every statement I've made, has been rooted in research, collaboration, and a genuine desire to effect change. If impact is questioned, that is a dialogue to engage in, not a reason to retreat." Hostin's lips pressed into a tight line. She knew the game. When someone refuses to yield, the interviewer must escalate, must push harder. But isn't there a danger, Emma, in being so unyielding? In taking stances that might polarize audiences or alienate allies? Emma leaned back slightly, folding her hands on her lap, a moment of serene calculation. Then she spoke, her tone softening, but every word striking like a hammer. "Courage is often mistaken for obstinacy. Leadership, advocacy, truth, they're never comfortable. I'm not here to avoid discomfort. I'm here to spark reflection, even when it's uncomfortable." The audience reacted, a mix of murmurs and audible gasps. The tension was tangible, almost suffocating. Some viewers in the front row exchanged knowing looks, whispering about the raw intensity between star and host. Even behind the cameras, producers and assistants leaned forward, sensing that what was unfolding would dominate headlines by morning. Hostin pressed on, a flicker of frustration seeping into her polished demeanor. "But Emma, consider this. Celebrities wield enormous influence. Doesn't that create a responsibility to temper one's messages? To be careful, to avoid misinterpretation?" Emma's gaze sharpened, piercing through the polished studio lights. "Responsibility doesn't mean silence," she said, voice rising slightly, controlled but unmistakable. "It means using one's platform with intention, honesty, and integrity. Misinterpretation is inevitable, but avoiding truth to prevent misunderstanding is cowardice, not responsibility." The audience leaned in. Some were nodding vigorously, some frowning in surprise, and others were simply frozen, captivated by the verbal dance unfolding before them. Hostin's next attempt to regain control was subtle but pointed. "So you're saying that even if your words are misconstrued, even if someone feels judged or attacked, you accept that as part of the process?" Emma's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Exactly. Growth is rarely comfortable. Change is never painless. If someone feels challenged, that's an opportunity for dialogue, not retreat." For a heartbeat, the studio seemed to hold its breath. The audience's collective energy shifted, oscillating between admiration, tension, and awe. Cameras captured every twitch of Emma's jaw, every shift of Hostin's posture, every subtle tightening of the hands resting on the desk. It was as if the air itself had become a character in the unfolding drama. Then Hostin struck at a more personal nerve, her voice steady but pointed. "Emma, some say you speak so confidently on issues you haven't personally experienced. How do you reconcile that with authenticity?" Emma's eyes flashed, but her voice remained composed, carrying the quiet power of someone who had anticipated this exact confrontation. "I do not claim to speak from lived experience in every circumstance," she admitted. "But I speak from research, from listening, from empathy. Authenticity isn't about personal history alone. It's about intention, honesty, and a willingness to learn." The tension ratcheted higher. The audience shifted in their seats, some murmuring agreement, some incredulous at the forthrightness of her words. Hostin's smile now held an edge of wariness. This wasn't the easy interview she had anticipated. Emma Watson was no longer just a guest. She was a force, a tidal wave of conviction contained within the contours of elegance and poise. Emma's inner monologue surged as she watched Hostin searching for any opening. This is the moment, she thought. Not to dominate, but to stand unshakable. Every question, every probing remark was a chance to model strength without aggression. She had rehearsed her intent, not her delivery, and that made every word land with authenticity. The conversation shifted into territory rarely navigated on daytime TV. The moral responsibility of fame, the ethics of influence, the personal cost of speaking truth in a world addicted to spectacle. Hostin's questions grew sharper, probing boundaries of philosophy, culture, and public expectation. Emma met each one with calm precision, yet the emotional undertow was undeniable. At one point, Hostin's tone hardened, a flicker of incredulity threading through her voice. "Emma, surely you must see that some people feel attacked when their beliefs are challenged? Isn't there a danger in alienating those who might otherwise be allies?" Emma's eyes glimmered with a quiet, unwavering fire. "I see it. I accept it. But truth and progress are not measured by comfort. Allies who fear challenge are not true allies, they are bystanders. My responsibility is to illuminate, to provoke thought, and to inspire change, not to placate." The audience erupted into applause. Some leapt to their feet, others whispered in astonishment. The energy in the studio had transformed completely. It was no longer an interview, but a live demonstration of courage, conviction, and the raw power of words. Every camera caught the subtle tension in Hostin's posture, the faint tightening of her jaw as she realized that Emma Watson could not, and would not, be contained. By the end of this segment, the stage was set for an even more intense showdown. Emma's words had landed with precision, the emotional stakes had risen, and the simmering tension between star and host had reached a fever pitch. Viewers at home felt it too, the pull of witnessing a collision of intellect, conscience, and courage that could not be scripted or rehearsed. The studio lights seemed to sharpen, turning every movement into a spotlight of intention. The air between Emma Watson and Sunny Hostin was almost tangible, charged with a current that made the audience lean forward, collectively holding its breath. By now, it was no longer just a conversation. It had become a battlefield of conviction versus scrutiny, composure against challenge. Every word had weight, every pause carried meaning, and the cameras captured it all with unflinching intimacy. Hostin, her voice measured but edged with a subtle impatience, leaned closer. "Emma, let's cut to the heart of it. You speak of courage and dialogue, but what about responsibility to those who look up to you? There are young people watching, forming their beliefs based on your words. Aren't you afraid of the impact if your statements are misinterpreted?" Emma's eyes glimmered, not with anger, but with that calm steel that had defined her from the start. Her voice, though quiet, carried an undeniable intensity. Impact is inevitable. Misinterpretation is inevitable. But silence, to avoid that, would be a betrayal. I cannot craft my beliefs around fear of judgment. If young people watch, I want them to see honesty, thoughtfulness, and courage, not pretense or caution. A ripple ran through the audience. Some whispered in awe, others nodded, and a few gasped at the quiet ferocity in her tone. Hostin's expression flickered, a trained interviewer's veneer slipping just for an instant, revealing the recognition that she had met someone unflinchable. "Unflinching," Hostin said, almost to herself, then redirected, sharper now. "But isn't there a point where confidence becomes arrogance? Where advocacy becomes imposition?" Emma leaned in slightly, her posture relaxed, but every muscle taut with purpose. "There's a difference between imposing and challenging, between dictating and illuminating. I don't seek followers, I seek engagement. I don't demand agreement, I demand thought. And yes, sometimes that discomfort looks like arrogance, but it is merely the courage to stand by one's convictions." The audience responded immediately, applause, murmurs of approval, and even a few audibly stunned gasps. The energy in the room felt like it could ignite, a volatile mix of admiration and tension. Cameras zoomed in on Hostin's face, catching the subtle narrowing of her eyes, the way her hands gripped the desk slightly tighter. You speak of courage, Hostin countered, voice slightly sharper. But real courage also requires listening. Isn't there a risk that by being so absolute, you close off the possibility of dialogue? Emma paused, letting the words hang. Then, softly, but with unshakable authority. Listening is essential. But listening does not require agreement. Listening does not demand silence. Dialogue requires openness, yes, but it also requires integrity. I will not dilute truth to accommodate comfort. I will listen, but I will not yield my convictions to avoid challenge. For a heartbeat, the studio seemed to freeze. Audience members exchanged glances, leaning closer to each other, as if to confirm they were witnessing something unprecedented. Hostin, ever composed on the surface, felt the shift. This was no longer an interview she could steer. This was a force she could observe but not control. Then came the question that changed the tenor entirely. Hostin, with a measured exhale, asked quietly, Emma, have you ever regretted speaking out? Faced consequences you didn't anticipate? Emma's gaze softened, and for the first time, a trace of vulnerability shimmered across her features. Regret is part of growth, she said. But I do not regret speaking truth. The cost of silence is far greater than the cost of being challenged. Every backlash, every criticism, every misinterpretation, they are lessons, not failures. And I choose to face them because the alternative, inaction, is unacceptable. The audience's reaction was immediate and visceral. Applause, murmurs of astonishment, some even rising to their feet. The room was electric with energy. Cameras captured every flicker of emotion. The tension in Hostin's jaw, the faint nods of the audience, the glimmer of determination in Emma's eyes. It was a cinematic moment, raw and unforgettable. Hostin, sensing both the power and the immovability of her guest, tried one final pivot. Emma, some will call this defiance. Some will call this arrogance. How do you reconcile the public perception with your intentions? Emma's response was quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly precise. I cannot control perception. I can only control intention. My aim is not to be liked or agreed with, but to be honest, to be courageous, and to provoke thought. The public will interpret as they choose, but my responsibility lies in truth, not approval. The tension in the studio reached its zenith. The audience, caught in the gravity of the moment, seemed suspended between admiration, awe, and disbelief. Cameras panned slowly across faces, capturing the collective realization. This was no ordinary interview. This was a live testament to courage, to conviction, to the unwavering power of a woman who refused to be silenced. Backstage, whispers erupted. Producers, writers, and assistants exchanged stunned looks. This is going to blow up online, someone muttered. No one will be talking about anything else tomorrow. And they were right. The electricity in the studio lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Social media had already begun to ignite, hashtags trending, clips circulating, debates erupting in forums, comment sections, and news outlets. Some praised Emma Watson as a paragon of courage. Others criticized her for being unyielding. But one thing was undeniable. She had commanded the narrative, owned the moment, and left an indelible mark on every viewer present. The cameras stopped rolling, but the storm had only begun. The studio was buzzing, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of papers amplified by adrenaline. Audience members sat frozen for a moment, absorbing what they had just witnessed. A confrontation that felt both unscripted and monumental. Emma Watson had not only answered questions, she had owned the room, reshaped the conversation, and sent ripples of intensity across the set. Backstage, the crew whispered in disbelief. Did you see that? Someone asked, voice barely audible over the hum of lingering excitement. She didn't just respond, she dismantled the narrative. Another producer nodded, jotting furiously in a notebook. This is going to trend globally. Every clip, every quote, it's gold. Social media won't survive this. And they were right. Within minutes, Twitter exploded. Hashtags about the confrontation began trending internationally. Clips of Emma's poised, unwavering responses circulated endlessly. Each snippet dissected, analyzed, celebrated, or debated. Comment sections swarmed with reactions. Some praised her bravery, applauding her intellect and courage. Others criticized her for being too rigid, too uncompromising. The debates spanned platforms, from news outlets to Reddit threads, Instagram reels to TikTok duets. People weren't just talking about Emma Watson. They were talking about what she represented, a fearless, unapologetic voice refusing to be silenced. Meanwhile, Hostin faced her own wave of scrutiny. Many viewers admired her skill, her attempt to navigate a complex, high-stakes dialogue. Yet others criticized her for pressing too hard, for challenging a guest who spoke with authenticity and calm authority. The media coverage framed it as a battle of intellect and conviction, a collision between celebrity influence and journalistic rigor that left no one neutral. Emma herself, as she exited the studio, was met with flashes of cameras and murmurs of admiration. Fans approached, eager to shake hands, to capture a moment, to express the awe they felt. Her walk was composed, her expression serene, but inside, the adrenaline still pulsed. She had anticipated scrutiny, backlash, even misinterpretation, but she had also anticipated impact. She had chosen the higher path, truth over comfort, courage over concession. Across social media, the clips became viral. Analysts dissected every inflection, journalists quoted every line, late-night shows referenced the confrontation with humor and awe. Memes circulated, both playful and reverent, capturing the intensity, the composure, the unwavering confidence. Public discourse ignited around the topics she had addressed: advocacy, courage, the responsibility of influence, and the moral power of speaking truth. And the audience? They were divided, inspired, challenged, captivated. Some reflected on their own lives, reconsidering how they approached conversations, debate, and the courage to stand firm. Others found themselves defending their own perspectives online, drawn into dialogues that they might have avoided just hours earlier. Emma Watson had not just spoken. She had provoked thought, ignited conversation, and created a moment that would echo far beyond the studio walls. For the viewers at home, the confrontation was a masterclass in integrity, eloquence, and bravery. It was a reminder that words have power, that courage can be subtle yet seismic, and that standing your ground, calm, poised, unwavering, can leave an indelible mark on everyone watching. As the dust settles and the social media storm continues to rage, one thing is clear: this confrontation will be remembered. The headlines will linger, the debates will rage, and the clips will continue to circulate. But beyond the virality, beyond the applause or criticism, there is a deeper truth. Moments like these challenge us all to reflect, to think, and to confront our own assumptions with courage. So now, StageView wants to hear from you. What did you think of Emma Watson's responses? Did she handle the confrontation with grace, or was her stance too unyielding? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to StageView for more explosive, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one. Be part of the conversation, witness the moments that shake the world, and never miss a beat of the drama that unfolds on the intersection of fame, courage, and truth. Because on StageView, we don't just tell stories, we put you in the heart of them.